Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and it is time to start a new build. This time, I'm actually continuing in a vintage Estes series from 20 some years ago, to 20 years ago apparently, exactly. This is another one of the Ansari X-Prize competitors. This one actually got built. It actually flew. Pretty sure it actually did make it to space. Um, but not orbital space. This was Virgin Galactic's rocket plane kind of design. This one was carried on a very interesting design plane that flew it up to altitude, several thousand, tens of thousands of feet, and then dropped it and its booster or its main engine engaged, and it flew up to reach the Kármán line and get into space. If memory serves too, one of these was lost with the pilot on board. So yeah, it hasn't flown in quite some time. It was never really a serious competitor for SpaceX or any of the other rocket companies that have made actual efforts. But it did fly, it was built, so this is different from the previous one. Anyway, we'll get started on this. This is a more significant build than the previous one. There's plastic to it, but there's a lot more, so this one will probably take longer. Anyway, as I mentioned, this is somewhat dated kit. It comes from the same stash of rocket kits as the previous one, so I owe the build of this to one of our dearly departed club members who left several hundred unbuilt kits to the club, so this one comes from him as well. Anyway, so thank you, Rick. Anyway, there are a couple plastic pieces that need to be, well, this is fine, it doesn't need to be handled. This is a little bit yellowed out, this tube, so apparently it was sitting, probably got exposed to some light, but it seems fine. Other things we need to do, well, there's a good amount of balsa to this, so actually I'm going to put this away. And this, because I don't need to do anything, well, might as well. It's a little bit to do with that. So there is some balsa work to be done, so we'll start there. Trim this open. The balsa looks like it's in good shape. Not warped, not deformed, so the intervening 20 years have been pretty decent to this, which is great. So, typical balsa work. I'm not going to do all of this, of course, but put a good sand into this to start with. Get rid of any obvious nastiness. This is from the era of laser cut fins, which is nice. It's a whole lot nicer using laser cut balsa than die cut. Die cut, well, it's not anywhere near as accurate. The die part's fine, but you removing it tends not to be. So, that's actually not terribly smooth. That needs more work. Remember, the goal here is we are not trying to make this perfectly smooth. That is just not going to happen without some fairly serious intervention. But I want to get rid of any obvious unpleasantness. This last spot that I had here, this was kind of shaggy feeling. I don't want that, and there's actually a good amount of this in these main parts here. So I'm going to take a little bit of work now, but better to do it while it's in a nice sheet here than when it's glued on. Much harder to deal with then. Yeah, there's still, I mean, it's dusty, so it's kind of hard to tell exactly, but yeah, there's still a couple little rough spots. Try to get rid of that. Alright. Naturally, of course, we need to do the other side as well. The other piece of balsa I'm not going to bother doing on camera because it's just the same process. Sand, sand, sand. Check every once in a while. see if there are any obvious spots that are particularly rough. If there are, well, go over them more. I am trying to get rid of the sawdust completely here because I don't really want it stuck on this side either, because you could potentially damage, not damage really, but if you end up putting it on top of a pile and smush it down, you could deform the wood or generally bad things. So I do want to get rid of that as best as I can. If you don't have a sanding block, by the way, this is so much easier to do with a sanding block than it is with like a folded over piece of balsa. Sanding blocks are not that expensive. I would definitely invest in one. Alright, time to cut. I'm going to cut along the straight parts that go with the grain first here. Hopefully I hit some of the burrs that are holding things in. But I really haven't. I haven't heard any little snaps that would indicate, there was one, that I'm hitting the burrs. The nice thing about laser cut is the amount of work you have to do generally is pretty low, because most of this has already been cut through entirely, and there are just a couple little spots where you need to run the blade to actually dislodge things. Unfortunately for this piece, it seems like most of them seem to be not with the grain, but at like a 45-degree angle or some significant angle to the grain, which makes it somewhat difficult. Alright, that should be out. A little piece there. By the way, when you're removing this, notice I am, first of all, keeping my hand clear as best I can, but I'm also cutting away from other fins when possible. Sometimes it's not, but if it is, you should really try to do that, because should the blade slip, first of all, you really don't want to cut your hand. Go back and watch the video where I had a little incident with that. But if the blade slips and you cut too far in the balsa, you really don't want to hit another fin if you can avoid it. And you can, most of the time. So again, I am just straight, there's a snap, that's good. This is almost out. I'm still, I really would rather take some small cuts. Ooh, that is really stuck. I'd rather take several small cuts and be safe. Oh, well, that's fun. That's fine, doesn't harm anything, but several small cuts, as I was saying, and have to rotate the sheet or whatever, than to accidentally carve into another piece of wood that I actually care about. This might, I think I'm going to flip this over. It feels like it's mostly cut through, but there's just a little small spot on the other side, which seems to be right about here. Yeah, and there we go. So those fins are taken care of. And now I've got these big pieces here. I'm just going to trace over the back on this side too. By the way, there usually is one side of the wood where it's easier to see the lines. I suspect that's probably because that was the side that was like facing up when they put it into the laser cutter. So it got burned more thoroughly. That's usually the side I would choose to cut through, but just because it's easier to see where you're supposed to be cutting. The burrs generally would be on the underside then. Like this, I believe, is the underside. Okay, this is one spot where I have no choice but to cut carefully, knowing like if the blade slips I could damage this little piece, so I really don't want to do that. So go slowly. I'm going to rotate this because I can see there's a burr here as well. Alright, so where is it left stuck in this? seems to be, yeah, it seems to be here, in the middle bit somewhere. Alright, that felt like it snapped. Yeah, that's basically free. I might as well separate these two now. And do resist the temptation to try to, oh, they're most of the way cut, and oops. And I'm going to just do it with my hands. Don't do that. My blade did slip here a little bit, and you can see I notched this. I didn't cut it very deeply, which is good, but I did notch it a little bit. So that's why you need to do the sewing carefully. It's not a problem. I didn't actually remove anything, but it's still, it's not great. I certainly didn't mean to do that. Hopefully it won't come back and become a problem later. Feels like there are more burrs, more points that the laser didn't cut in this than there typically are in a more modern kit. I'm not sure if that's true or if that's just the way this particular design had to be, but that's how it kind of feels. Alright, this is mostly done again. I'm not going to try to force this. I'm going to try to find, yep, right there, where the burr still is attached, and just cut through. Perfect. This part right here, yeah, that's very fragile. I'm glad I did not damage that. Alright, the rest of this is scrap. There is another sheet of balsa that needs to be taken care of, but that can wait a little bit. The other thing that I'm going to do right now, since I have the blade, and get rid of these things, get them out of the way, is there's a little bit of cutting to be done. The instructions call for a razor saw. I don't have a razor saw, and in fact, when I've gone looking for them, I can't find one. So if you happen to have one, more power to you. That's probably what you should be using for this. But I'm going to end up using the hobby knife, and seeing how this is pretty much the exact circumstance where I ended up chopping myself to the point where I had to get some stitches, I am going to get my cut-proof glove and put it on my other hand. So this is, it's a glove. I thought they were made out of Kevlar. I don't know what the fabric is, but that's not what gives it strength. This is reinforced with there's like steel wire in this. They're cheap. They are effective at their job, So do yourself a favor. Get one if you plan on doing this kind of thing. You might also want, I didn't opt for this, but I kind of wish I did. There are ones that have like little grips in the fingers, and since plastic is fairly slippery, this might be a great place for that. Anyway, the number one rule here, regardless of whether you are using whatever tool you are using, is that you should take this slow and do not expect it. Oh my goodness, it went right through the first time. Do not expect it to do that. In fact, that's about half of the work, apparently, and I was not pushing all that hard either. I'm very surprised. Yeah, some of this just is really cutting like butter. This is not a particularly fresh blade either. I'm not sure why I managed to get that quick of a cut through it. It might be the type of plastic being used. I don't know. But in any event, that was most of it. And this, I do kind of peel this to make it come off the last bit. I don't treat it like balsa. I need to sand this at some point, so I'm less concerned about that. Alright, this bit here, yeah, where are we cutting this off? It looks like, I think we're going to cut off, yeah, this is kind of a tough one. I think we're going to cut it right here, but in looking at it, yeah, well, I mean, you can see the instructions too. This looks a lot smaller than the piece that I would cut if I got right here, but the lower pieces don't seem to have this, like, see how it goes down and comes back out? It doesn't seem to have this at all. So I'm going to try cutting it right here, and if this wasn't quite right, well, and I guess I'm doing it wrong, but I think this is where the cut ought to be. Maybe it's supposed to be right here. That would be a royal pain. This isn't as bad because it's right, the fact that it's right next to something makes it easier to cut through it. And I say that this bump right here is not going to be super fun to cut through, one would think. So in any event, what I was going to say when I made the first cut is that you shouldn't expect to go through it the first time around. This is the second time around, and I'm still surprised I'm making any real progress with it. You should expect to make several passes of this before you start getting any real progress. I don't know if this is because the plastic is old or if it's an older style of plastic that cuts more easily. I don't think that's the case, but for whatever reason this is cutting pretty quickly and pretty well. But again, take your time. There's nothing to be gained by rushing, and there's a whole lot to lose, like, say, blood, or however much your copay is to go to the emergency room. Alright, that's probably pretty good. Yeah. So I'm just going to kind of peel this slowly, and that looks pretty good. Alright, these are both junk. They end up getting trashed. I think the last thing we're going to do right now is we're going to sand this down. Before I sand it, I'm just going to look at it quickly. Be careful of touching this because there could be some sharp little burrs. But if there are any obvious spots that you didn't cut very smoothly, then you can, let's put this away, you can use the knife to just shave off a little bit as necessary. I'm actually not going to use the block for this. I'm going to use just a sheet of sandpaper here. This makes a horrible sound usually, so oh yeah. Whew, that's awful. Alright. Yeah, that's really bad. Let's again check this to see if anything needs to be trimmed. This probably could be, the cut isn't, it's not as uniform as the other one, but I think I'm just going to sand it and hope for the best. That seems pretty good. So I might have to make some additional trims to that. I don't know. We'll find out a little later. Last little thing I'm going to do in this video is the eyelet here. I'm going to assume has to come off. So yeah, I'm going to do that quickly. Generally, you should cut toward the center of this, but I don't want to switch hands. So I'm just going to go gently, because the risk here is that if you push too hard you could chop right through the eyelet and then this wouldn't work. So generally you want to cut toward the middle of this thing rather than away and toward the eyelet, but if you go slowly it's not as big of a deal. Alright, taken care of. That should wrap it up for all I'm going to do in this video. In between now and the next one, I'm going to finish the other sheet of balsa that I haven't messed with, and then we'll get to the actual construction. So thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next part. See you then.